This is Sandra Lafke Carlson in Tualatin, Oregon at the Tualatin Heritage Center on December 11th, 2019, and I'm here with Annett Saarienen, and she is here to tell us a bit about her family's time in Tualatin and her growing up in Tualatin. So welcome, Annett.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here with a very dear friend. And this reminds me of old times in Tualatin when Mom's coffee pot was always on and people would stop by for a cup of coffee, exchange news, exchange energy, and then go about their day. And so this brings back good memories of that. So I appreciate being here.
Thank you. And while you tell us some of your stories, I'm just going to write down keywords because this will help people in the future if they're going to research some topic like your family or Tualatin, and so that'll help them find information.
Cool. Well, I have an agenda today, and it's to thank the people of Tualatin who helped raise me. And I just feel so grateful that I was plunked down right in the middle of this farming community, the granddaughter of immigrants, and everybody around me was the grandchild of immigrants, and we pulled together as a community to build better lives. And I'm so grateful to them because I drink from a well that I have not dug, and that's a quote from Lois Martinezzi. And it reminds me that we need to be grateful for the people who contributed to the community to make our lives better. And the mothers, back when my dad was small, didn't speak the same language, but they all gathered at the school to provide lunches for their children. And the people who started the cemetery, they didn't even speak the same language, but they all got together and built that cemetery. And I was digging around the concrete slab for our family plot, and it was hot and I was tired and I was sweating, and I'd spent 15 whole minutes doing that, and I thought, what did the pioneers have to do? They had to cut the trees, they had to burn the stumps, they had to till the land, they had to build the church, they had to build the school, they had to build the stores. And I'm complaining about 15 minutes in the hot sun, so I continue to be grateful, and I try not to whine.
Could you tell where your I guess it was your grandparents who were immigrants, and where they came from and about when?
Grandpa came from central Finland in 1904, and he went to Astoria, where all Scandinavians went to fish and work in the timber industry. Grandma came over later. They didn't know each other in Finland. She came from northern Finland on the Swedish border, and she came through Duluth and then worked her way out here, and they met in Portland and married. And then moved to a 10-acre farm in South Tualatin.
10-acre farm? Was that the name of, it was the name of the land?
No, that's how big the farm was.
Oh, I see, okay. And what kind of farming did they do?
It's called truck farming. And they had strawberries and raspberries and pears and apples and plums. So except for the wintertime, they had something going all the time, and he would truck his produce to the farmer's market on 4th and Yam Hill in downtown Portland.
Okay. And and what were their names?
Both their names got changed at Ellis Island for Grandpa and in Duluth for Grandma. But Grandpa's real name was Audiel Saarienen, and he had such an accent that they wrote it down as Attiel, and that was really too hard, so they got called Ed.
Okay.
or sorry.
Okay.
And Grandma's name was Seska, and they didn't understand that one at all, so they said, well, your name is Francis now.
Oh, gosh.
And the official story is that didn't happen to anybody, but I've heard other stories from immigrants, and their accents are so thick, and the people writing down were not all that well trained and couldn't really discern the
distinguish.
syllables, and so they wrote it down as best they could, and that's how their names got changed.
Okay, okay. So at that time, and what year was that?
Grandpa came in 1904
Okay. Was that to Tualatin or to the United States?
to Astoria.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when they settled in Tualatin, so there were a lot of different languages other than English that were spoken by the first.
Oh,
immigrants
yes.
that came here.
There were Swedes, Germans, Italians, Swiss, and those people still have come down through the ages. But when they got here, I think there was some French as well. They didn't speak the language. And so they built the common language, they built the community, they built everything.
Oh.
It was a nice feeling, and that still runs down today. There's that feeling of community here, which is rare for a suburb these days. There's a real spirit here.
So, so your dad was Ted Saarienen, and he grew up in Tualatin.
Yes.
And
He was born on the farm.
Oh, he was. Oh.
Yeah.
And I think he and my dad were very close in age. I don't know if they
Yes.
were in school in the same class, but I know they went fishing together, and I think maybe played basketball.
Absolutely, they played basketball together. It's unusual that the men in the community were involved in sports in high school, which is common, but afterward, as young men, they retained the teams, and they played baseball together, and I know the basketball team was called the Tualatin Towners.
Oh.
And Slim Camp, who worked the feed store with his wife Laura, were the coaches.
Oh, okay. I remember them. I think I remember going to a basketball game or two.
Yeah.
Where they were playing, and I know there's a story I remember my dad telling me about your dad, and I think maybe they were in high school, or even maybe younger than that, but they would go fishing together, and I think there were a couple of other guys who would join them, and they would be fishing here in the area. And my dad said, because your dad was very tall, he was a big guy.
Yeah.
And so my dad said, Ted Saarienen always got first pick. He could get the best fishing hole because nobody wanted to argue with him.
He would just look at you, and you know you did it his way.
And your mom, did your mom's ancestors come from Scotland?
Roundabout. She was mostly Anglo. There was some Irish there, a lot of Scottish, a lot of English. Her mother's maiden name was Southwick, which is very English. And those people came over before the Revolutionary War. They were not on the Mayflower, but they were on the third ship that came over.
Oh, wow.
And there's a poem about one of the ancestors because she was arrested for consorting with Quakers.
Oh.
So it's interesting that they came over for religious freedom, but it was only for their religious freedom, not for anybody else's. And Cassandra Southwick was her name. And her husband and son were in prison with her, and I think her son died there.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, that was in New York. And so I've got one step off the boat on my dad's side and clear back to the Puritan times on my mom's
Oh my
side.
goodness. So you've done some, or somebody in the family's done some genealogy.
Yeah, my sister
Oh.
Yvonne has been real deep into genealogy.
Okay. And your mom's name was Mimi, or that's the name she went by?
Well, Grandma was deaf, so she didn't know how to pronounce it. So her name was Mimi, M-I-M-I.
Oh.
And the first time I heard Mimi, I looked around and said, why are they pronouncing that name so oddly? It's because we were pronouncing it oddly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you live on the same farm as your grandparents?
I did not, but when Yvonne and Errol were born, they lived in a house next door on the farm. And then when my brother Errol was about 8 months old, they moved down to the lowlands. And there was a shack there, and Dad built that up from scratch, added a bedroom, added a kitchen, added the living room, added the bathrooms. He just,
Wow. And he
Did that
did the work?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So having a grandparent who was deaf, and that was your grandmother?
Yeah, my mom's mom.
So did she use signs?
Oh, absolutely. I'll tell you the story of that. Grandma was born in South Dakota on a homestead, and she was born in August, I think 1895. On New Year's Day before that, her dad was coming home from a party, and he got cold, so he wrapped the reins around his neck and put his hands in his pocket, and something spooked the horse, and he was thrown from the wagon and was killed.
Oh, gosh.
So great-grandma was pregnant with her first child, and she kept the farm going, and when grandma was 3, she got meningitis and measles.
Okay.
And the doctor did come to the house, and he said, Mrs. Southwick, your daughter is going to die, and you have to be in quarantine. There's nobody who can help you.
Oh.
So great-grandma was kind of a stubborn woman. And so she dipped grandma in cold water to bring the fever down, and then warm water to keep her from hypothermia. And she did that for 36 hours straight. And there was a young man who knew the situation. He chopped wood for the fire and shoved it in through the kitchen door so he wouldn't get sick. And the fever melted grandma's eardrums. But she had grown up with language to that point, so she could still talk, and she could read lips. But they moved out here so grandma could go to the deaf school. It was one of the few in the territories.
Oh, is that here?
In Portland,
Oh.
yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so grandma got a real good education. They taught her to cook and sew and do figures, and they did just fine.
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh.
She was quite an inspiration.
Huh.
Hello there.
Ladies, how are you doing?
Good.
I'm so glad to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Yes.
We're doing an oral history here, and I'm
Oh.
recording her.
Yes.
Good
So-
one, good one, I bet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll leave
Well,
you alone.
introduce them on there so they'll know who we're talking to.
Oh, sure. Yes, Norm Parker just came in, one of our longtime members here in the Historical Society. So, yeah. Hi, Norm.
Hi, Sandra.
Yeah.
Um,
So she ended up marrying that young man that helped her, and they moved here to Lake Oswego on Lakeview Boulevard, and they bought a Sears house from the catalog, and then it arrived on a wagon, and they built that, put slot A for tab B, and they
Oh.
built the whole house that way. And so when grandma grew up and got married, they built a little house next door. So
Okay.
we got to see grandma and great grandma.
Oh, Wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh.
And great grandma taught grandma to sew, grandma taught mom to sew, and mom taught me to sew, which is one of my hobbies. But I was sewing according to Civil War standards. And so in my mid-20s, I thought there must be an easier way to be sewing these things. So I took lessons from Sears and went, it's really easy to sew and fun. It was kind of drudgery before.
Huh.
But things have changed in 150 years.
Thank goodness, in some ways.
Yes, yeah. You don't have to go blind making those tiny little stitches.
So sewing was kind of an important skill. that,
Absolutely.
and-
Mom used sewing to hem pants for the old bachelors around town, and she made dresses for people, and she did couture sewing.
Okay.
And she could take any pattern and adjust it to fit anybody. And one year she made a set of flannel pajamas for everybody in the family. And at Christmas time, we got in those pajamas and sat around all evening talking and laughing. And they were gray for the guys and pink for the females.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah.
How fun.
And that's something my cousins remember very well, that she made pajamas for everybody in the family.
Oh, that's great. What a
Yeah.
nice memory.
Yeah.
And what were there other things that your family did together when you were growing up? What did you do when you got together, just to have fun, or?
Well, Dad was an avid camper, an avid hunter, avid fisherman, and he knew what that was about. And so he would take us on family fishing trips, and he and I hunted together, but I don't think he took Yvonne and Yvette.
Okay.
But I really liked hunting
Huh.
and fishing, and he relayed wisdom while we were sitting in the truck
Uh-huh.
watching the valleys, and it was really nice. Nice time with Dad.
Yeah. And did he manage the gas station at Wonker's Corner for a while?
It was called Bob and Ted's, and they were in business together, and Jack Wonker had that land as part of the donation land claim, so he let Bob and Dad use the building for the gas station, and they did mechanics there. Dad had actually built some cars from scratch with Harold Langdon, and Harold went on to be, I think, a vice president of Pettibone Mercury.
Oh.
And so he could just build anything from that. But when there were some hard times, and so the gas station couldn't support both families, so Dad went to work for Western Steel Casting and Foundry.
Okay.
And he made ship's propellers and all sorts of things. And he knew how many trikes and bikes and Ford fenders to put into the furnace with packages of chemicals to make the strength of steel that was needed for whatever they were building.
Really? Huh. Was that during World War II?
That was after.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you were growing up, you lived in Tualatin?
Yes.
On the flats?
Yes.
And so were you ever affected by any of the Tualatin River floods?
Our cornfields was. We had water in the cornfields way over my knees, but that was lower than the sidewalk, so it was probably 3 feet down, but the water table came up.
Oh, okay.
That was a fun place to play.
In the
Yeah.
cornfield?
Oh, yes, and the water and the mud was just wonderful. And all the kids on the street came to our house to play in the mud, and we were just filthy. So after we would come in soaking wet and muddy, Mom would wash our clothes, and we'd be in blankets around the kitchen playing music and singing, and she would make hot chocolate for us. And then when the clothes were clean and dried, she could send the kids home.
What a tolerant mom to let you do that.
Gosh. We had one of those old-fashioned bathtubs upstairs that you could get 11 kids in, and we would fill that and run and then slide down the end of the bathtub to the end, and water sloshed all over. And I went downstairs after that, and water was coming down the ceiling and down the walls, and Mom was just scrubbing up the water. And I said, you should have told us to stop. And she said, you guys were having so much fun, I couldn't interrupt it. We had all the neighborhood kids running and sliding down that bathtub. Yeah, she was very tolerant.
Yeah. And sometimes it's worth it, to let the kids be busy and not getting into harm. So
Yeah. She did tell the story one time that she wondered where Errol and Johnny Long, and there was another boy, I think it was Larry Barngrover, where they went during the day. So she followed them and kind of hid behind bushes and watched them. And they went down to the park and climbed the trestle and shinnied up the metal part for that upper arch. So she climbed up the trestle, and it took her a while to get to the top of that middle arch.
Your mom climbed up?
Yeah. And she didn't like heights, but the kids were already on the other side of the bridge because they had walked balancing across that metal arch and were sliding down the other side.
Oh my goodness.
And she went, well, they're going to be okay. So she climbed down and never followed them again.
That's great. What an interesting mom she was.
Yeah.
Oh, and so in your family, there were your mom and dad, and then Yvonne was the oldest,
Mm-hmm.
and then you, Annett.
No, there was Yvonne, and then Errol, and Yvette, and me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Yvette is 18 months older than I am. And Errol's kind of a vague memory, but I remember him. He died when I was 2.5. He was 11.
Okay. And
So he's 8.5 years older than I am. And then,
Okay.
no, can't be that much, because Yvonne is 9 years older than I am.
Okay. So, and I have a vague memory of him too, because we were living down in Tualatin, and I think was he in the Boy Scouts or the Cub Scouts?
Yes, he was.
Maybe going door to door, selling something to raise money for the Scouts, and I remember him coming to our door.
Yeah.
And then he passed away. Well, he was still quite young, a teenager.
He was 10.5.
Oh, just 10.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he had, was it lymphoma or leukemia, Hodgkin's?
Hodgkin's disease. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a disease of the lymph nodes.
Okay, and they didn't have much treatment then to.
And it was 100% fatal at the time.
It was.
And to know that it's 95% curable now is just wonderful.
Yeah.
I was going to wear my Relay for Life shirt today, but it was in the laundry.
Oh, so you participate in
Mm-hmm.
Relay to raise funds for cancer research?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because what was 100% fatal is now curable, and that comes from money given to research and people just doggedly using their microscopes and their test tubes and brave people who are willing to try the tests. So, yeah, I like to give back to that.
Yeah. My son was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma 7.5 years ago. And so he went through months of treatment, chemotherapy, and he's been fine since then, very healthy. And
That's a miracle.
so, but every October, I participate in the fundraiser walk for LLS, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Because we've got to beat all those illnesses.
I take the midnight to 2 a.m. shift
Oh, you do?
because I'm allergic to the sun and I want to participate. It's real quiet out there and people talk in hushed tones, and usually the stars are out, and it's time for contemplation, and it's good for me.
Oh, wonderful. So when you were growing up, you went to the old Tualatin brick school on Boones Ferry Road.
Yes.
And do you remember, any of your best friends or any teachers who were important to you?
Every teacher was important to me. Mrs. Rates in first grade was very patient in teaching me to read and talk. I read a lot because Mom read a lot, even in first grade, but she taught me bigger words and how to sound words out. Before that, I was just a sight reader. And she was very patient with me. And I had a lisp. And so she recommended that I go to therapy. They came to the school and I had to speak through a straw. And I thought that was very nice that they wanted me to speak correctly. And because of the ear infections I had, I couldn't quite hear the difference between cake and take. And so people corrected me so that I could actually speak like an intelligent person. And they spent a lot of time with me, and I really appreciated that. And Mrs. McEwen in second grade was a very strict disciplinarian. Nobody gave her any trouble. And then Mrs. Pearson in the third grade taught us art, and it was wonderful.
Oh.
Sorry about that. That's Gershwin, and that's my
Gershwin,
phone ring.
That's lovely. I like Gershwin.
Yeah. And then Mrs. King, Lila King in fourth grade,
I remember her.
read to us after lunch, and we would write numbers. First it was 1 to 100, and then it was 1 to 1,000, while she read to us Little House on the Prairie.
She read, yes, I remember that.
And
That was wonderful.
the Laura Ingalls Wilder books.
Yeah.
And we just loved that. And we would have contests at the blackboard on multiplication tables. And she made learning fun. And so I still do math in my head and do long division in my head. And I use it every day. And I thank Lila King for that. And Mrs. Stolberg, who used to be Miss Hinkle in fifth grade, also let us read to the class. And so we did the historical events like the Oklahoma Land Rush, and we learned about history that way by reading novels to the class, and we each took turns.
Oh, really? Oh.
So that was wonderful.
Yeah.
And she made fractions a lot easier than I had anticipated, because I lived in terror of having to learn fractions. And she got us all through it.
Oh.
And then Mr. Brown, the principal, took a wonderful interest in us, and he taught us shop, girls as well as boys. And he taught us how to make leather moccasins. We made tooled leather belts. One time he helped us make earrings out of pennies with a ball peen hammer and enamel for our mothers for Mother's Day. And it was just lovely that they took such an interest in it and shared their wisdom and their art. And it really enriched our lives.
Teachers are so important.
Yes. And during the summertime, Mrs. Sherman, the librarian, opened once a month. So we would have something to read during the summer. We would come home with stacks of books and then take them back the next month. And that way we could continue our reading. And I thought that was wonderful of her to spend her off time with us.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But did you, a lot of kids who grew up in Tualatin in the 30s, 40s, 50s, picked berries or other crops in the summer. And did you or your siblings ever do that?
Oh, we all did. We picked berries at Sasaki's.
Okay.
And I didn't realize it at the time, but they were very strict and only took the hard workers who were diligent. And I learned that from Mrs. Christensen, who also had a berry farm south of town. And she told me as an adult that I was lucky to have been picked by the Sasaki's. And they taught me about hard work, about cleaning up after myself, and sticking with it. And boy, they were nice to us.
Oh, good. I understand. I understood. I never picked berries at the Sasaki's. I picked iris bulbs on my grandparents' farm. But I understand that you couldn't step over a row at the Sasaki's. If you were there in the field, you had to walk to the end of the row to get to the other side of the row.
Those bushes were hard to come by. They didn't want kids smashing the bushes or the berries. And we picked cannery style, so we took the hull off the berry before we put it in the crate. So they were ready for the cannery.
Okay, so that took more time.
Yes. Huh. And the guys that could pick 10 crates, we just idolized. Mike Sherman was one of them. He lived down the road from them. And we all aspired to pick 10 crates. I got up to about 6, and it was all I could do to do that. So we admired those people.
Were you ever involved in Girl Scouts or Campfire Girls?
Bluebirds. Mrs. Wiedemann, Harriet Wiedemann, had a bluebird group, and we were called the Fairy Bell Bluebirds, and we did all sorts of things. She was very imaginative. And our song was, "Bluebirds, bluebirds, we are happy bluebirds, working, not shirking as we go along, merrily singing our happy song. Oh, don't you wish that others knew just what the Bluebird girls could do? We work with a will and never stand still, for we are the Fairy Bell Bluebirds."
Very nice. Good memory.
And that instilled a love of work and a love of art and a love of adventure. And boy, she was good to us. We were so lucky to have that.
And then when you went to junior high or high school, you went to Tigard?
Yeah, Tuolity Junior High.
Okay.
That was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade.
Okay. Yeah. And any big memories for that, or?
Again, we were so fortunate to have the excellent teachers. Mr. Biederman, the principal, was a scientist, and he was involved in tests with ground squirrels, which looked like chipmunks. And so we got to house the chipmunks in our yard, and they were just in like a chicken wire cage on sawhorses. And we had this big windstorm called the Columbia Day Storm.
Yes.
And the trees were going down, and it was loud, and things were crashing against the house, and I was worried about those ground squirrels. And I looked out the window, and the wind was blowing through the cages, so they were fine, but the oak tree around the cage and the fir trees all went down, crashing down. The ground squirrels survived okay. But he was studying DNA, and back in the early 60s, it was unusual for kids to go around saying deoxyribonucleic acid. And I didn't realize till later how new the subject was, and he had us right on the cutting edge of that and shared it with us. And I thought, how nice that he would care so much to do that, because principals have other duties. And he came in, he took us to scientific lectures down at OSU.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
We were so lucky.
Yeah, very progressive teacher.
Yes. And I can
principle.
still draw a cell of electron microscopy with the Golgi apparatus and the mitochondria. It was just
Wow.
fascinating.
Uh-huh.
So I was really lucky to be involved with that.
Yeah.
And Margaret Edwards taught English, and boy, she was a strict person, but she really encouraged us to write and express ourselves.
And that October 12th storm,
Mm-hmm.
That must have been a hurricane, because that was
Yeah,
a big one.
I think some of the gusts were up to 125, 150 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And afterwards, people had to go down to the store to get water because their pumps had no electricity.
Oh, yep, for about a week,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think. So,
And
but your house stood, you didn't have any
our house
major
was
damage?
built in the 1800s, and it was the maids' quarters for a mansion up the hill. Del Judy lived in that house.
Okay.
But ours was the servants' quarters, and they moved it on logs down the hill and across the swamp to the place where it stood, where I lived in it.
Uh-huh.
And it was built out of shiplap, and so it just moved with the storm.
Oh, gosh.
We lost trees
amazing.
and I think maybe 3 shingles. But
Huh.
the house just swayed with the storm and it would survive. And
Wow.
the same thing with the earthquake that came in the 60s. We watched the floor swell upstairs, and it raised about 3 feet, and it was a wave that came across the floor, and the bunk beds slid into the stairwell, and the house swayed, it rolled with it, and there was no damage.
Wow, I don't remember that. Of course, I wasn't living here. I had graduated from high school and was, I guess, in Eugene at that time. So
I think I was about 7th grade, and
Okay.
that was the oddest thing to see that floor come up, because it raised a good 18 inches,
Oh my
and
goodness.
then it would just roll just like the ocean.
Huh.
That whole house took it.
Oh, but the house, I suppose, is gone now.
Yeah,
So
it
many-
was torn down when my brother-in-law and his friend started ID Automotive, and it became a mechanic shop and a gas station.
Okay. So you graduated from Tigard
Mhm.
High School,
Hmm.
and then what happened after that in your life?
Oh, I tried adulting for a while, and I gave up on it and became younger and younger. I had 2 children, Jeff and Victor, and then got a divorce from my husband, and went back to school at PSU and graduated in '86 in accounting.
Okay.
So I was a late bloomer.
Okay. Well, yes, I think I was too. It took me a while to figure
Yeah.
out what I wanted to do,
Yeah.
and
Married my second husband in '83, and we were married for 21 years, and he died of complications from myasthenia gravis.
oh gosh.
Yeah, that was a tough time.
Yeah. So that was several years ago.
Oh yeah, it was 2004.
Okay.
That was the 2004 was the year of my grandpa's 100th anniversary of coming to America, and one of the stories was that as a fisherman, you went out in any kind of weather because you had to get the fish.
Mhm.
And he and the captain of the boat went out over the Columbia River Bar, and it was the 3rd roughest bar in the world. This was before the jetty was put in. And a squall came up, and the boat went down, and the captain was drowned.
Oh gosh.
And Grandpa swam 3 miles through that storm to the beach. And the only thing that was left of his clothes was the rim around his T-shirt, because it was all beat off him.
Uh-huh.
And he should have died of hypothermia. He should have died of exhaustion. He should have drowned. but they don't call them stubborn Finns for nothing. So in 2004, I was going to swim across the Columbia River in honor of his swim. And that was the year my husband died, so I said, I can't do that. So in 2005, I started swimming at 24-Hour Fitness, and then I practiced in Finland on my family trip to get the feel of the cold water. And then Labor Day, I swam across at Hood River with the Chamber of Commerce. And there were about 500 of us that jumped off that big, what do you call those steamships that have the paddle wheel? Paddle wheel, yeah. And I had the distance, I had the temperature, I didn't count on the current in those waves, and it took me an hour to cross it.
Oh my gosh, you must have been exhausted.
I was. I could barely stand up by the time I got to the other side, because I couldn't really see without my glasses, so I was quartering upstream so that I wouldn't get swept downstream, because once you pass a certain point, they'd pick you up and you were done. So I was swimming against the current, trying to get to the other side, and I had to go take a nap at the hotel. When I got up, the transfer shuttle bus had to stop, so I had to walk to my car, which was 3/4 of a mile down the road. So I got my car and came back, loaded up my luggage, and I headed for home. And when I passed Multnomah Falls, every muscle in my body seized. And I drove home with my finger and thumb on each side of the steering wheel.
Oh my gosh.
And I was glad there was no traffic, because it would have been hard for me to hit the brakes. But I got home. I didn't walk the next day.
I bet. But you did it.
Yes.
That's incredible. It's very
there were
impressive.
people in kayaks, and the Coast Guard was there, and there were a lot of people for support. And my grandpa did it by himself, and I did it with the support of many people. But I realized what a tough time he had making that swim.
Oh gosh, what a tribute.
Yeah.
What a nice way to remember him.
Yeah. And I don't have to do it again.
And you don't, because you did it.
Yeah, that was tough.
Wow. So, any other stories you want to tell? You have good stories. I remember you told me once about, was it like a missionaries or a pastor or someone who would come to your house and was very annoying to your mother, or maybe to you as kids, and you and maybe a brother or sister went upstairs.
That was Yvonne. And
was that? Oh, not you, huh?
No, that was before my time.
Okay.
But this woman kept coming to the house and telling my mother that Dad was going to go to hell because he drank and smoked. And Yvonne and Errol did not appreciate that. And they saw her coming one time, so they got in and got the balloons out of the medicine cabinet and filled them with water. They weren't balloons. And they dropped them on her. They missed. It hit their feet. And she looked up and saw the kids doing it. My mother was just mortified. But after that, she didn't tell him that Dad was going to go to hell.
Oh, okay, good. She learned her lesson.
Yeah. But one of the ministers from the Tualatin Church would come by and have a beer with Dad, and sit and talk and chat and be friendly. And so it was just, some people were judgmental, and some people were really wanting to run other people's lives, and they were kind of tolerated but avoided.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. One of the great pleasures in our life was a fellow named Jim DeLong, and he lived behind the old city hall, which was the original firehouse. And we were not allowed to go into his house, but we could knock on his door and ask him to come to the steps of the fire department. and tell us hunting stories about his time in Tennessee. And he talked about raccoon hunting and possum hunting and going fishing, and he just had wonderful stories to tell us. And he would spend hours with us sitting on the steps,
Really?
just telling us his stories. And he said if the quarter moon was tipped up, it was going to rain because the water was coming out of the moon. And if the quarter moon was kind of like a bowl, it wasn't going to rain because the moon was keeping the water. And he could tell all sorts of folklore. And that was a wonderful experience that he cared to tell us the stories. And we were not allowed in his house, and I never went in.
But he was good to tell stories, to share those with kids.
Yeah.
And I guess like to be with kids. And how nice.
Yeah, and he would take his time to sit with us. And we just had many kindnesses, and people were kind to each other. And one time Laura Camp, again, moved to the Baptist retirement home in Northeast Portland, and I went over to visit her. And she told me that Kay Nyberg had visited her and spent all day going to class and going to lunch with her, and how much she appreciated the visit. And when Red Nyberg died, I met Kay at Ori's house, and I said, Kay, I have to tell you how much Laura appreciated your visit, and it was very nice of you to spend all that time with her. And she said, back when my dad died, we were going to go to the funeral, and my father-in-law was going to watch Johnny. And then an hour before they were to leave, the father-in-law decided to go to the funeral, and there was nobody to watch Johnny, so she was going to have to stay home from her own dad's funeral. And she...
They didn't take the kids then to
No.
funerals.
And Laura found out about that and offered to babysit Johnny. So after all those years, Kay still felt the obligation, and she paid Laura back by spending time with her. And that's the kind of atmosphere that we grew up in, is when somebody did you a favor, you either paid it back or passed it on. And when Dad did something nice and was thanked, he would say, pass it on.
Oh, how meaningful.
It is.
And maybe, do you think it came from growing up in a community that was small for a long time, up until maybe the 1960s, and people pretty much knew everyone and took care of each other as much as they could.
Yes.
So.
They lent each other tools, and they helped each other build decks and fix cars, and they didn't have any money, so they had to help each other and use their skills. And they were very dependent upon cooperation and helpfulness, which was nice.
Yeah. So you live in Tigard now, and you have your accounting business in Tigard, but you still feel a connection to Tualatin.
My heart is in Tualatin, and I'm a member of the Tualatin Chamber of Commerce, because that's the Chamber of Commerce in Tualatin used to be called the Booster Club, and they did such nice things for the community, and they did nice things for the kids, and so I have a debt to pay there, and so I like to participate and help where I can. But I raised my kids in Tualatin, so I'm a member of the Tigard Chamber of Commerce to give back to that community that was so good to us. But my heart is in Tualatin.
Yeah, mine too. I think.
Dad helped start the Tualatin Crawfish Festival, because that was crawfish is a good Finnish delicacy.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, didn't know that.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi.
Yeah. We're saying hello to Cindy Frost. We're doing an oral history.
We might be done. Is there anything else you want to share? This has been a really good interview. You know, a lot of
thank
interesting
you.
things that I've learned about your life and family. And
We were just encouraged as kids to express ourselves through art and had adventures. And Dad would grab a bunch of kids and throw them in the back of the truck before seatbelts and go up Christmas tree hunting in the rain, and then we'd come back and Mom would have hot chocolate for us, and or he'd grab a bunch of kids and us and go to the coast. And Red and Bonnie Nyberg took us places, and when we were out in the street playing ball, Mervyn would come out and play ball with us.
Oh, Conover?
Yeah.
Conover.
Red would come out and play with us, first bouncer fly. Sometimes Dad came out. One time, the news in the Oregonian was that the world was going to end that night, and it had me bothered. And at dinner time, we were discussing it, and Dad said it was a bunch of hooey. So Yvette and I were out playing after dinner, and Dad came out and played with us. And I said, Dad, why are you out here playing with us? And he said, if the world ends tonight, I can't think of any better way to spend my last moments than with my kids.
Oh.
I was so grateful.
Yeah. Oh, good Dad.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh. Well, that's a good story to end on, I think.
I have one more.
Okay.
Campfire Girls.
Okay.
Always an adventure, always encouragement. And that song is Worship God, seek beauty, give service, and knowledge pursue. Be trustworthy ever in all that you do. Hold fast on to health and your work glorify, and you will be happy in the law of Campfire. And that's kind of my motto in life.
Wow, good memory. I was in Campfire Girls. Maybe not as long as you were, because I don't remember that song. Oh,
Every
thank
little
you.
bits and pieces of my life I use every day. So I'm so grateful that I had that experience and had the people around me to be so supportive. I was just darn lucky.
Yeah, yeah. You obviously were.
And it's nice to spend time with you.
It's nice to see you too. We still have to take the West.
Take the train to Wilsonville.
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe after taxes.
Absolutely.
The tax season.
Yes.